Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to continue reading Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson. We're going to pick up where we left off with chapter 19. The last thing that happened was something startling happened with Clovis back in Westwood, and also the Carter's house has unfortunately been set on fire by an accidental spill of cockroach spray and an oil lamp. Chapter 19. Miss Minton woke in a four-poster bed and found herself staring at a picture of a Russian nobleman on a sleigh being chased by woods. She was lying in a spare bedroom in the Kaminsky's house. Her head ached, for she was not used to wine, and a lot of it had been drunk the night before at Mademoiselle Lily's farewell party. The Kaminsky's governess was returning to France on the following day, and Miss Minton had agreed to come and work for the Russian family and teach Olga and Maya. In spite of her aching head, Miss Minton was content. Maya would be happy here in this easygoing and friendly house, away from the ill temper of the twins and their parents' strangeness. She had said nothing to Maya till Mr. Murray had given his permission, but finally yesterday his cable had come. He had not only agreed to let Maya go live with the Kaminskys, he had arranged to send Maya's allowance directly to Miss Minton at a different bank. It seemed that the British consul had already warned the old lawyer that the Carters were trouble. Miss Minton got up and got dressed. Downstairs in the breakfast room, the Countess was sitting over a big samovar, pouring out glasses of steaming Russian tea. Olga was beside her and got up to curtsy, but Mademoiselle Lily was still in her room. "She's having breakfast in bed. She's a little tired after last night," explained the Countess. Miss Minton smiled. Mademoiselle Lily was probably very tired. She had been so sad about leaving the Kaminskys that she had comforted herself with an amazing amount of wine. Nothing less like breakfast at the Carters could be imagined. The light, luxurious house, the friendly servants, the Kaminskys themselves. Sergei had already left. He now went to cadet school at Manus. To teach only Maya and Olga would be a delight. "But I must hurry back," said Miss Minton. "I don't like to leave Maya too long with the twins. Professor Glastonbury has kindly agreed to store my trunk, so Maya and I will be able to come down the riverboat next week." No, my husband will send a boat for you," said the Countess. Miss Minton had not planned to spend the night at the Kaminskys. Mademoiselle Lily had begged her to stay for the farewell party, but Miss Minton had stood firm until the Count had pointed out that if she stayed, she could sign her contract with his lawyer the following morning, naming her as the new governess. Knowing how little the Carters were to be trusted to pass on messages, Miss Minton had sent the note from Maya to Furo, and one of the Count's servants was ordered to take it to his hut. "Good news," Miss Minton had written. "I'll tell you everything in the morning. I'm staying overnight at the Kaminskys because I have some business to see to in the morning. Tell the Carters I'll be back at midday, but tell them nothing else." Furo would make certain that Maya got the note. She had seen how the native people guarded Maya since Finn went away. She was rolling up her napkin when there was a commotion at the door, and the Count, who had been supervising the loading of one of his ships, came quickly into the room, followed by Professor Glastonbury, already badly out of breath. The Count went straight to his wife and spoke hurriedly in Russian, but Miss Minton caught the word Carter and had risen to her feet. "Oh, my dear," the Countess turned to her. "It is bad news, I'm afraid. There has been a fire at the Carters' bungalow. The house has been destroyed, but everyone has been rescued. They have been taken to the municipal hospital." Miss Minton was already by the door. Every trace of color had vanished from her face. "The Count's carriage is waiting to take us to the hospital," said the Professor. Miss Minton turned to the Count. "Thank you," she managed to say, before she followed the Professor out into the street. The twins were crying. Their beds in Ward C of the hospital were close together because the ward was very full, and they lay on their sides facing each other and gulped. "It's gone. It's just gone. All of it's gone. There's nothing left, not a single bill." The nurses had first been kind. Neither of the girls was badly hurt. Beatrice's hair was singed, and she had a small burn on her leg. Gwendolyn had fallen on the gravel path as she ran out of the house and had sprained her ankle. But there was always shock and smoke inhalation to consider, and for a while a nurse sat by their beds and tried to comfort them. "Your mother's safe. She's going to be all right. She's in the next ward. You can go and see her." But the twins were not crying for their mother. "It's our money," sobbed Beatrice. "The money for the ward, 20,000 milrays each, and it's all burnt." "Perhaps you will get it again from the insurance." But the Carters, of course, were not insured, and the twins went on sniveling till the nurse became impatient and walked away. Miss Carter was in the next ward. Her arm was bandaged, and she had inhaled a lot of smoke. Even so, she'd found time to complain about the way the hospital was run, the lack of hygiene, and the patients whose young children were allowed to visit them and ran over the ward. "And there's a fly on my water jug," she said fretfully. "Two, in fact." She was still complaining when a smartly dressed Englishman came to her bedside. He was the British consul's assistant. "Miss Carter, the consul has asked me how we can help you return to England. There seems to be little future for you here." "You mean you'd pay our fares?" "For you and your daughters, yes. Do you have anyone you could go to England, relatives or friends?" Mrs. Carter frowned. She did not actually seem to have friends. Then her face cleared. "Lady Parsons in Littleford. She would take us in, I'm sure. She's my mother's cousin. Well, almost. Her address is Grey Gables, the Promenade, Littleford-on-Sea." The young man wrote this down, and then he said, not meeting her eyes, "Your husband won't be returning to England just yet, I'm afraid." And as gently as he could, he told her that when he came out of the hospital, Mr. Carter faced a trial and possible imprisonment for fraud and embezzlement. Just as he had cheated the bank in England, so had he done out here. It wasn't only Gonzales to whom Mr. Carter owed more money than he could ever hope to repay. Miss Minton ran up the steps, and the professor, mopping his brow, ran behind her. "The Carter family," she said to the desk. "The girls from the fire. Where are they?" "Ward C," said the receptionist, and they hurried up 2 flights of stairs. The twins were still whimpering, but they stopped to stare at Miss Minton. "You're not badly hurt, I understand. I hope you're not in pain," she said. "Our money's gone," Beatrice sniffled. "Yes, but you might have lost your lives." Then she said, "Where's Maya?" The twins shrugged. "Daddy went back to find her. We don't know where she is. She didn't come in with us." Miss Minton's heart began to pound. The professor put a hand under her arm. "I'll go and ask the sister." He made his way down the corridor and came back with a set face. She said there were only 2 girls and the parents in the ambulance. She didn't know that there was another girl. Miss Minton took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "But Mr. Carter went back for her," the twin said. "She must be here." The sister had come out of her office to join him. Now they all hurried to the men's ward. Mr. Carter's burns were serious. His hair and eyebrows were singed. His face was swollen. Both arms were bandaged. He lay still with eyes closed, but Minty had no thought to spare him. "Mr. Carter, where is Maya? Your daughter said that you went back for her. Did you bring her out safely?" "I tried," lied Mr. Carter. "I went right to her door, but it was impossible. An inferno." Miss Minton swayed. "I am not the kind of person who faints," she said, as the sister moved towards her. But there, she was wrong. Chapter 20. For a few hours, the bungalow had been beautifully orange and crimson and violet, with flames lighting up the night sky. Showers of golden sparks flew upward as the fire danced and played on the dying house. Then it was over, and there was nothing left. Only gray ash and those strange objects which survived disaster. The nozzle of a flit gun, a splintered wash basin, and in what had been Mr. Carter's study, a single eye, cracked by the heat, staring creepily up at the heavens. So when Finn sailed back down the Negro at dawn, he saw no flames and heard no roaring, as the house was destroyed. Everything at first seemed to be as it always had been. The big trees by the river, the huts of the native people, the Carter's launch riding at anchor. Then the dog, standing beside him, threw back his head and howled. "What is it?" asked Finn. But now he, too, smelled the choking, lingering smoke. And as he sailed towards the landing, he saw it. The space, the nothingness, where the Carter's house should have been. Not even an empty shell, nothing. He had thought that the news of his father's death was the worst thing that had happened to him, but this was worse, because he was to blame. If he had taken Maya as she begged. He was shivering so much that it was difficult to steer the Arabella to the jetty and make her fast. There was no point in searching the ruins. It was so obvious that no one could survive such a blaze. But there was one last hope. The huts of the native people had been spared. Perhaps they had gotten Maya out. Perhaps he would find her sleeping there. He pushed open the door of the first hut and went inside. Then the second, and the third. They were completely empty. Even the parrot on its perch had gone, even the little dog. A broken rope in the run outside showed where the pig, terrified by the flames, had rushed back into the forest. There was no doubt in Finn's mind. They had let Maya burn and fled in terror and shame. What would it be like, Finn wondered, going on living, knowing that he had killed his friend? The howler monkeys had been right to laugh when he said he wasn't going back. He had turned downriver again almost at once to fetch Maya, and he had made good time traveling with the current, but he had come too late. Finn went outside again and stood on the square of raked gravel that had been the Carter's garden. His mind seemed to have stopped working. He had no idea what to do. Should he go into Manus and see if he could find anything out? From the hospital, perhaps? After a while, he found himself walking back along the river path to where he had left Arabella. As he came to the fork in the path, which led back into the forest, the dog put his head down excitedly to a patch of leaf mold. Finn pushed him aside and saw a smear of blood. And then, a little way off, and another, and another. He almost fell over her. She lay so still, hidden in the leaves and creepers, almost as if she had burrowed into the forest to die. But she was not dead. She lay stunned, still in her nightdress, breathing lightly with closed eyes. The blood came from a gash in her leg. He could see no burns on her skin. She must have fainted from loss of blood. And then when he said her name, she opened her eyes. One hand went out to his sleeve. "Can we go now?" she whispered. And he answered, "Yes." Maya opened her eyes and saw a canopy of trees, and shining through the topmost leaves, a high white sun. She could smell the rich, heady smell of orchids, and hear a bird whose single piercing cry came clearly over the puttering sound of an engine. And then the overhanging trees disappeared. She was looking up at a pale, clear sky, and the light was suddenly so dazzling that she closed her eyes for a moment because she did not want to wake up or stop. She wanted what was happening to her to go on and on and on. She was lying on a ground sheet at the bottom of the boat. They were moving steadily through the water, not fast, not slowly, the perfect speed to lull her to sleep. She was covered by a gray blanket. She pushed it off and saw that her leg was bandaged. It throbbed, but not unpleasantly. It seemed to belong to someone else. She closed her eyes and slept again. When she woke once more, it was to find that something was resting against her side, snoring gently. A dog, the color of dark sand. So then she turned her head and saw behind her Finn sitting quietly in the stern, his hand on the tiller, and she knew that she was on the Arabella and safe. It was the native side of Finn that had taken over when he had found her in the woods, that had managed to carry her to the land stage and lay her down on the Arabella, that had bandaged her leg and made her swallow one of his bark potions, and then cast off, telling her to sleep and sleep and sleep. Sometimes the European side of him protested, told him that he ought to take her to the hospital for proper treatment, but he took no notice. He knew now what was best for Maya, and he was right. For now, as she woke beside the dog, she was herself again. The fear and exhaustion had gone from her face. "I'm hungry," she said, and smiled at him. She had escaped through her high window. The gash on her leg was made from the broken glass that she scrambled through. The doors were already smoldering when she woke. I don't remember much after that. It was the smoke, I think. I know there wasn't anyone in the huts. "Why not?" said Finn fiercely. "They promised they looked after you." "There was a wedding, an important one. They all went. And Minty, she went somewhere too," said Maya. "She left me." "No." "What do you mean, no? She wasn't there. She didn't come back from her day off." "Maybe, but she wouldn't have left you. That isn't what would have happened." "What about the others?" "They escaped. I saw the river ambulance take them away, but I hid. I couldn't bear to be with them anymore. They were all quarreling and screaming, so I hid in the trees. I didn't notice my leg at first, but then..." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter, Finn. None of it matters because you came back." They set a course back up the Negro and then turned into a smaller river, the Agaripe, which flowed northwards to the lands where the Zante had last been seen. It was a beautiful river. They traveled between small islands where clumps of white egrets roosted or clouds of tiny pearl-gray bats flew up from fallen logs. What amazed Maya was how varied the landscape was. Sometimes they sailed through dark, silent jungle, where all the animals were out of sight on the topmost branches. Sometimes the river wound through gentle countryside, almost like England, where swamp deer grazed in the grassy clearings. Once they passed into a patch of scrubland and saw a range of bare brown hills in the distance before they plunged into the rainforest again. "If this is the green hell of the Amazon, then hell is where I belong," said Maya. She was completely happy. When she took the bandage off her leg, she found a mulch of some strange green mold, which Finn had put there, and beneath that a wound which was almost healed. "You ought to be a doctor," she said, "or a witch doctor, perhaps. It's often the same thing." She had cut the bottoms off a pair of Finn's trousers and borrowed one of his shirts. Finn had pilfered a roll of cotton, meant for the native people, from which she'd made kind of a sarong when she was in the water. The nightdress she had escaped in had been torn up for cleaning rags. Everything she had owned had been destroyed in the fire, and she missed nothing except for her toothbrush. Scrubbing one's teeth with twigs was not quite the same. But she trusted Finn completely. If he said a pool was safe to swim in, she dived in without a second thought, and the dreaded piranha fish did not tear at her flesh, nor did a caiman come at her with her snapping jaws. If he told her a mushroom was safe to eat, she ate it. My father had this thing that he used to say to me, she told Finn. It was in Latin. Carpe diem, seize the day. Get the best out of it, take hold of it, and live in it as hard as you can. She pushed back her hair. After he died, and my mother, I couldn't do it too well. There never seemed to be a day that I wanted to seize all that much. But here, yes, some places are right for you. Your mother was a singer, wasn't she? Yes, but she never made a fuss about it. I never remember her saving her voice for the performance or gargling with eggs and all that stuff. She'd just sing, in the house, in the garden, anywhere. Everyone says you ought to get your voice trained, he said, and frowned because if she had a future as a singer, perhaps she shouldn't be taking off into the unknown. She shook her head. I'm all right like this. Won't you miss music? There's always music. You just have to open your mouth. They'd stopped earlier to make a fire in the little bay and cook the fish that they'd caught earlier. You had good parents, said Finn. So did you. She steadied the pan on the flames and poured in the oil. Do you think there will be someone in the Zante who remembers your mother? Finn blew on the embers. I don't know. We may not find the Zante, he warned her. Maya shrugged. It doesn't matter. If we do, will they accept me? I'm not native. If they don't, we won't stay. I wouldn't let anything happen to you. I'm not scared, said Maya. And she wasn't. She'd been scared of the nastiness of the twins and of being shut up in the Carters' bungalow, but she wasn't scared of traveling through unknown lands with a boy hardly older than she was herself. She thought perhaps she wouldn't be scared of anything ever again if she was with Finn. They did not hurry. Their route led them west into the forests of Japura, and each night Finn laid out such maps as he had and the notes that his father had given him. One thing stood out. In the fork of the river, there was a small island with a haraconda tree standing between two called kumi ponds. If they found this marker, they were in Zante country, but how far or how near it was, they did not know. All the same, they stopped again and again. Finn wanted to collect the plants that he knew that he could sell, and he was teaching Maya. He climbed to the top of the leaf canopy and came back with clusters of yellow fruits, which could be boiled up to treat skin diseases. He found a tree whose leaves were made into an infusion to help people with kidney complaints, and brought back a silvery fern to rub on aching muscles. Most of these plants had native names, but as they sorted their species and put them to be dried and stored in labeled cotton bags, Maya learned quickly. You'd be amazed how much money people give for these in the town, said Finn. But not everything he collected was for sale. He restocked his own medicine chest also. Also, every day, he bullied Maya into taking her quinine pills. Only idiots get malaria in dry season, he said. I think I ought to cut my hair off, Maya said, one morning as she tore up yet another tooth out of Finn's comb. No, that's a bad idea. Maya looked up surprised. But you wanted Clovis to cut his hair. That was different. They talked of Clovis often, and it was Finn now who wondered if they'd been fair to him. He's either shut up in that awful place, or he's confessed and been thrown out. Well, at least he's in England, and that's what he wanted. But you could see that to Finn, who was afraid of nothing else, Westwood was still a dread. If he's been thrown out, it will start again, I suppose, he said. More crows, more hiding. Well, they won't find us here, said Maya. They were anchored between two islands in a kind of cave made by overhanging branches of a pano tree. A pair of otters had been diving around the boat. The frogs started up their evening croaking. It had been a magical day. They had seen a family of terrapins sunning themselves and a pair of harpy eagles. There had been a gentle following breeze to help them, and the rain that sometimes came down, even in the dry season, had held off. I know you said you used to wake up every morning in the lagoon when your father was alive and think, here I am where I want to be. Well, that's how I feel when I wake up on the Arabella. Maya did not care whether they found the Zante or not. It was not about arriving for her. It was about the journey. Even the sadness about Minty deserting her had gone. For Finn, who had almost kidnapped her, there were moments of anxiety. He should have told someone that Maya was safe, instead of taking her away without a word, but gradually he stopped worrying and gave himself up to the journey. If Maya knew deep down that she would not be allowed to sail away forever up the rivers of the Amazon, she managed to forget it. She sang as she worked, and when Finn whistled, "Blow the wind southerly," she smiled, because She had been wrong to be cross with the wind. The wind had brought him back, and she was content. And when Finn complained at the end of the day that they had not come very far, she said, "What does it matter? We've got all the time in the world," which is not always a clever thing to say. That's where we're going to stop today. Join us tomorrow for Chapter 21 of Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson, illustrated by Kevin Hawkes, and published by Puffin Books. Once again, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.